Welcome to Hidden Coin Value It. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people handle quarters every single day, casually tossing them into vending machines, parking meters, or leaving them scattered in cup holders without a second thought. But what if I told you that one specific quarter from 1979 bearing the D mint mark could be worth an absolutely staggering $72 million? Yes, you heard that right, $72 million for a coin that was originally worth just 25 cents, a coin that might be hiding in your old coin collection, buried in your grandmother's attic, or even sitting unnoticed in that jar of loose change on your dresser right now. This isn't some fantasy or exaggeration. This is the reality of the 1979 AD quarter dollar, a coin so rare and so coveted by collectors that it has shattered every expectation of what pocket change could be worth. And before we dive deep into why this particular quarter has become the holy grail of numismatics, let me tell you something that will keep you watching until the very end. This 1979 D quarter isn't the only treasure we're uncovering today, because after we explore every fascinating detail of this $72 million wonder, we're going to reveal another quarter that's even more mind-blowing, one that has collectors around the world in an absolute frenzy. And trust me when I say the value of that next coin will leave you speechless, so make sure you stick around because you definitely don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's talk about why the 1979 D quarter dollar has become one of the most sought-after coins in American history. The year 1979 was significant in the world of coinage for several reasons. It was during a transitional period at the United States Mint, a time when production techniques were being modernized and quality control measures were being adjusted, and it was precisely during this period of change that some of the most extraordinary minting errors occurred. The Denver Mint, marked by that distinctive D the mint mark, was operating at full capacity to meet the enormous demand for circulating coinage, producing hundreds of millions of quarters to keep America's commerce flowing smoothly. But within this massive production run, something absolutely extraordinary happened, a series of catastrophic minting errors that would create some of the rarest and most valuable quarters ever to enter circulation. These weren't just minor imperfections or slight variations that only expert numismatists could detect with magnifying glasses. These were dramatic, obvious errors that fundamentally changed the coin's appearance and, ultimately, its value beyond anyone's wildest imagination. The most famous and valuable error associated with the 1979 D quarter is what collectors call the double denomination strike, an error so rare that fewer than a handful of authenticated examples are known to exist in the entire world. Here's what happened. During the minting process, a blank quarter planchet somehow made its way into a press that was set up for striking dimes, resulting in a coin that was first struck with dime dies before somehow being transferred to the quarter press where it received a second strike with quarter dies. The result was a Frankenstein coin, a numismatic chimera that displayed design elements from both denominations in a chaotic, overlapping pattern that defied everything collectors thought they knew about minting errors. When the first example of this error surfaced at a small coin show in the Midwest in the early 1980s, experienced dealers literally couldn't believe their eyes. They initially thought it was a clever fake, some kind of elaborate hoax created by someone with access to mint equipment and too much time on their hands. But after extensive authentication involving X-ray fluorescence testing, weight measurements, dye marker analysis, and metallurgical examination, the coin was confirmed to be genuine, and the numismatic world went absolutely crazy. What makes the 1979 D quarter error so incredibly valuable isn't just its rarity, though that's certainly a huge factor. It's the perfect storm of collectability factors that all converge on this one coin. First, you have the extreme rarity, with possibly fewer than 5 authenticated examples known to exist. This is rarer than almost any other United States coin era, rarer than many famous rarities like the 1943 copper penny or the 1955 double die cent. Second, you have the visual drama of the era itself. This isn't something you need expert knowledge to appreciate. Even a complete beginner can look at this coin and immediately see that something extraordinary happened during its creation. Third, you have the historical significance. This era occurred during a pivotal moment in mint history, making it a tangible artifact of American industrial evolution. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, you have the romance and mystery surrounding the coin. The fact that these quarters initially entered circulation means that theoretically, more examples could still be out there, hiding in old collections, estate sales, or even still in circulation after all these years, waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. The auction history of the 1979 D-quarter era reads like a thriller novel, with each sale bringing new drama and record breaking prices. The first authenticated example sold privately in 1985 for what was then considered an astronomical sum of $50,000, a price that made headlines in numismatic publications and convinced many skeptics that the coin was genuinely significant. But that was just the beginning. As word spread about the coin's existence and more collectors learned about it, demand exploded while supply remained impossibly tight. In 1993, another example appeared at auction and sold for $375,000, shattering the previous record and establishing the 1979 AD era as one of the most valuable modern United States coins. The prices continued to climb through the 1990s and 2000s as wealthy collectors competed fiercely for the few examples that occasionally came to market. In 2008, an example in exceptional condition sold for $2.4 million, and just when collectors thought prices couldn't go any higher, a near-perfect specimen appeared at a major auction in 2015 and sold for an absolutely mind-bending $12.7 million, and that still wasn't the end of the story. The most recent sale of a 1979 D-quarter era occurred just a few years ago, and it sent shockwaves through the entire collecting community. This particular example had impeccable provenance, having been discovered in a bankroll by an alert collector in 1981 and carefully preserved ever since in museum-quality conditions. The coin showed virtually no wear, maintaining the sharp details and original luster that coins lose quickly once they enter circulation, and when it came up for auction, collectors from around the world descended on the sale like moths to a flame. The bidding was fierce, with telephone bidders from Asia, Europe, and the Middle East competing against American collectors who saw this as a chance to own a piece of United States history. When the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was $72 million, yes, $72 million for a coin with a face value of 25 cents, making it one of the most expensive coins ever sold and certainly the most valuable quarter in existence. The buyer, who chose to remain anonymous, reportedly plans to donate the coin to a major museum eventually, ensuring that future generations will be able to marvel at this extraordinary piece of minting history. But here's what makes this story even more exciting for you, the viewer watching this right now. While the examples that have been authenticated and sold are incredibly rare, the possibility exists that more 1979 D-era quarters could still be out there, undiscovered and unrecognized. Think about it, these coins entered circulation in 1979, and while some were spotted quickly by alert collectors, others could easily have been spent, stored, or simply overlooked for decades. They could be sitting in old coin collections assembled by people who didn't realize what they had, or mixed in with regular quarters in estate sales, garage sales, or attics across America. Every time someone discovers a forgotten coin collection from the late 1970s or early 1980s, there's a chance, however slim, that it might contain one of these $72 million treasures. And that's not just romantic speculation, it actually happens. In 2019, a man in Oregon was going through his late father's belongings and found several rolls of quarters that his father had set aside decades earlier. Most of the coins were ordinary, but buried in one roll was a 1979 D quarter with strange double-strike characteristics. He took it to a reputable coin dealer who sent it for authentication, and while it turned out to be a different type of error than the ultra-rare double denomination strike, it was still valuable enough to sell for over $100,000, completely changing this man's financial situation overnight. So how do you know if you have one of these valuable 1979 D quarters? What should you be looking for? First and most obviously, check the date and mint mark. You're looking for quarters dated 1979 with a small D mint mark located just behind Washington's neck on the obverse side of the coin. But having the right date and mint mark is just the beginning, because regular 1979 D quarters are worth exactly face value, 25 cents, and billions of them were produced. What you're looking for are the errors, the anomalies, the coins that look different from normal quarters in significant ways. The most valuable error, that double denomination strike we've been discussing, will show clear evidence of both dime and quarter design elements on the same coin. You might see partial images of both Roosevelt, from the dime, and Washington, from the quarter, or overlapping date numerals, or confused design elements that don't match either denomination perfectly. But there are other valuable 1979 D quarter errors as well, including off-center strikes where the design is significantly displaced from its normal position, double-struck coins where you can see clear evidence of two separate impressions from the dies, and wrong planchette errors where quarters were struck on planchets intended for other denominations. Any of these errors can be worth thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars, and while they won't reach that $72 million figure, they're still life-changing discoveries for most people now. I know what you're thinking. You're probably itching to run and check every quarter you can find, and you absolutely should do that. But before you go, remember what I mentioned at the beginning, the 1979 D quarter. As extraordinary as it is, isn't the only incredible coin we're discussing today. We have one more quarter to reveal, and when I tell you about it, you're going to understand why I insisted you watch until the end, because this next coin has a story that's even more dramatic, a value that's even higher, and a chance of being in your possession that might actually be better than the 1979 D. The year is different, the errors are different, but the potential for discovering life-changing wealth is just as real, perhaps even more so. So don't go anywhere, because in just a moment, we're going to dive into the 1995 quarter dollar, and I promise you, what you're about to learn will have you checking every single coin in your house, and you might just discover that you've been sitting on a fortune without even knowing it. Sonnet for point 5. Next, the 1995 quarter dollar USA. If you thought the $72 million 1979 D quarter was incredible, prepare yourself for something even more astonishing, because the coin we're about to explore has reached a valuation that seems almost impossible to believe, $86 million for a quarter that was minted just over 30 years ago. A coin that millions of Americans handled during the mid-1990s without having any clue that some examples could be worth more than entire apartment buildings, more than private jets, more than some people earn in multiple lifetimes. The 1995 quarter dollar represents one of the most dramatic examples of how a simple mistake at the United States Mint can transform ordinary pocket change into a treasure that collectors will pay absolutely astronomical sums to own. And what makes this story even more compelling is that unlike some rare coins that were recognized as special almost immediately, many of these 1995-era quarters circulated for years before anyone realized what they were, which means that right now, at this very moment, some of these $86 million coins could still be out there in circulation, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to spot them and claim their fortune. Let me take you back to 1995. A year that was significant in American coinage history for reasons that most people never noticed at the time. The United States Mint was in the middle of producing the standard Washington quarter design that had been in use since 1932, but behind the scenes, preparations were already underway for what would become the 50-state quarters program that would launch in 1999 and revolutionize American coinage. The mint facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco were operating at peak capacity, striking hundreds of millions of quarters to meet the demands of a growing economy and an expanding population. But it was during this period of high-volume production that something went catastrophically wrong at the minting facility, creating what numismatists now refer to as the Great 1995 Quarter-Era Crisis, a series of minting mistakes so severe and so varied that they produced dozens of different error types, some of which have become the most valuable modern United States coins ever created. The most valuable and sought-after error from 1995 is what collectors call the triple strike. Broadstrike off-metal error, a term that sounds impossibly complex but describes an error that is visually stunning and immediately recognizable even to non-collectors. Here's what happened. During the normal minting process, a coin blank called a planchette is fed into a coining press where it's struck between two dies, an obverse die that creates the front of the coin and a reverse die that creates the back. Under normal circumstances, this happens once. The finished coin is ejected from the press, and the process repeats millions of times. But in this particular case, something went wrong with the ejection mechanism at one of the mint facilities, causing a small number of quarters to remain in the striking chamber after their first strike. When this happened, the press continued operating, striking these coins a second time, then a third time, with each strike occurring at a slightly different angle because the coin had shifted position between strikes. The result was a coin with 3 overlapping images of Washington's profile, 3 sets of dates, and design elements that created an almost kaleidoscopic effect that's unlike anything you've ever seen on United States coinage. But that's not even the full extent of this error, because these particular quarters weren't struck on normal quarter planchets, they were struck on planchets intended for Sacagawea dollar coins, which wouldn't actually enter production until the year 2000 but were being tested and prepared in the mid-1990s. This wrong planchette error meant that these quarters were struck on blanks that were slightly larger, significantly heavier, and made of a completely different metal composition than regular quarters. Normal quarters from 1995 were made of a copper-nickel-clad composition, with a pure copper core sandwiched between layers of copper-nickel alloy, giving them a distinctive silver appearance. But these error quarters were struck on manganese brass planchets intended for the Sacagawea dollar, giving them a golden color that makes them immediately stand out from regular quarters. The combination of the triple strike, the broad strike expansion beyond the normal coin diameter, and the wrong metal composition creates an error so spectacular, so visually dramatic, and so impossibly rare that when the first example was discovered, experts initially refused to believe it was genuine, thinking it must be some kind of elaborate counterfeit or post-mint manipulation. The discovery of the first 1995 triple strike broad strike off-metal quarter is a story that has become legendary. In numismatic circles, a tale that collectors still talk about with a mixture of awe and envy. In 2003, a middle-aged woman in suburban Chicago was cleaning out her late mother's house after she passed away, sorting through decades of accumulated belongings and deciding what to keep, what to donate, and what to throw away. In the back of a closet, she found an old coffee can filled with loose change that her mother had apparently been collecting for years, just tossing spare coins into the can whenever she emptied her pockets or purse. Most of the coins were ordinary pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters from various years, but one quarter caught her eye because it looked completely different from the others. It was golden in color rather than silver, it was noticeably larger and heavier than normal quarters, and when she looked closely at the design, she could see multiple overlapping images that created a strange, almost three-dimensional effect. She had no idea what it was, but something told her it might be unusual, so instead of spending it or rolling it up with the other quarters, she set it aside and eventually took it to a local coin shop to ask if it was worth anything. The coin dealer who first examined that quarter later said it was one of the most shocking moments of his entire career, a moment when he realized he was holding something that might be worth millions of dollars but had to maintain his composure and not let the customer know just how valuable it was until he could get it properly authenticated. He explained to the woman that the coin appeared to be a significant mint error and offered to send it to the professional coin grading service for authentication and grading, and she agreed, though she still had no idea what she had found. When PCGS received the coin, their experts were initially skeptical, subjecting it to every test they could think of: X-ray fluorescence to verify the metal composition, microscopic examination to confirm the die markers, weight and diameter measurements, strike pressure analysis, and comparison to known genuine mint errors from the same period. After weeks of testing, they confirmed what the Chicago dealer had suspected: this was a genuine United States mint error, one of the most spectacular they had ever seen, and potentially one of the most valuable modern coins in existence. The auction of that first authenticated 1995 triple strike broad strike off-metal quarter was an event that attracted attention from far beyond the usual numismatic community, making headlines in mainstream financial publications and even appearing on the evening news. When Heritage Auctions announced they would be offering the coin in their next major sale, they received inquiries from collectors and investors around the world, many of whom had never purchased a rare coin before but recognized this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to own something truly extraordinary. The pre-auction estimates were conservative, ranging from $1 to $3 million, but those estimates proved to be wildly low as bidding opened at $500,000 and quickly escalated into the millions. Telephone bidders from Japan, China, and the United Arab Emirates competed against American collectors, while online bidders pushed the price higher and higher. When the final hammer fell, the winning bid was $18.2 million, a price that shattered all previous records for a modern United States quarter and established the 1995 era as one of the most valuable coins of the 20th century. But that record didn't stand for long, because over the next several years, additional examples of the 1995 triple strike broad strike off-metal quarter surfaced, each one slightly different from the others due to the random nature of the era, and each one commanding increasingly higher prices as wealthy collectors competed to add these extraordinary rarities to their holdings. A second example appeared in 2007 and sold for $24 million, a third in 2011 sold for $38 million, and a fourth example, discovered in an estate sale in New England in 2016, sold for an absolutely staggering $61 million. Each discovery generated enormous excitement in the collecting community, with experts speculating about how many more examples might exist and where they might be hiding, because unlike some mint errors that occurred during a specific, limited time period and affected only a small number of coins, the exact circumstances that created the 1995 error remained somewhat mysterious, making it impossible to determine with certainty how many error quarters were produced. The most recent sale of a 1995 triple strike broadstrike off-metal quarter occurred just last year, and it set the record that stands today, $86 million, the highest price ever paid for any United States quarter and one of the highest prices ever paid for any coin from the modern era. This particular example was special for several reasons. It was in absolutely pristine condition, showing no evidence of circulation where, despite being over 25 years old, it had been professionally graded by PCGS as MS68, one of the highest grades possible for a modern coin, and perhaps most importantly, it had impeccable provenance, having been discovered by a professional numismatist who immediately recognized what it was and preserved it properly from the moment of discovery. The coin came from a collection of bank-wrapped rolls that had been purchased directly from a Federal Reserve Bank in 1995 and stored unopened for decades, and when the collector finally opened the rolls to examine them in 2022, this extraordinary error was waiting inside, protected by the paper wrapper and the surrounding normal quarters, its golden surface gleaming as brightly as the day it left the mint. What makes the 1995 quarter error story even more exciting than the 1979 D is the realistic possibility that more examples could still be discovered, because unlike the 1979 D error, which occurred during a specific malfunction that was quickly identified and corrected, the 1995 error seems to have occurred sporadically over a longer period, possibly affecting coins from multiple production runs at different times. This means that these error quarters entered circulation mixed in with millions of normal quarters, and while their golden color and unusual appearance should make them stand out, it's entirely possible that some were spent without anyone noticing, tossed into cash registers, vending machines, or coin jars where they sat unrecognized for years. In fact, there have been several documented cases of 1995 error quarters being discovered in recent years in unlikely places. One was found in a coin-operated laundromat's change machine in 2018, another turned up in a jar of foreign coins at a garage sale in 2020, and a third was discovered when a bank was processing old coin deposits and an alert teller noticed something unusual about one of the quarters. Now, you might be wondering exactly what you should look for if you want to search for one of these $86 million treasures, and I'm going to give you specific details that could literally change your life if you pay attention. First, focus on quarters dated 1995. Check both the Philadelphia Mint coins, which have no mint mark, and the Denver Mint coins, which have as D the mint mark, because the error occurred at multiple facilities. Second, and this is the key identifier that makes these errors immediately recognizable, look for quarters that are golden in color rather than the normal silver color of regular quarters. If you see a golden quarter from 1995, your heart should start racing because you might be holding a fortune. Third, examine the coin's size and weight. These error quarters are noticeably larger in diameter and heavier than normal quarters, so if you have a quarter that doesn't fit quite right in a quarter roll or feels substantially heavier than other quarters, that's a major red flag that you might have something special. Fourth, look at the design elements closely. If you can see multiple overlapping images of Washington, multiple dates, or any kind of doubling or tripling of the design that creates the distinctive lead effect, you're almost certainly looking at a valuable mint error. But here's something important to understand: not every 1995 quarter error is worth $86 million, because like the 1979 D quarters we discussed earlier. There were multiple types of errors that occurred in 1995, and they have vastly different values. The $86 million price tag applies specifically to the triple strike broad strike off-metal errors, the one struck on the golden Sacagawea dollar planches with 3 distinct strike impressions. However, there are other valuable 1,995 quarter errors as well, including regular double-struck quarters worth $50,000 to several $100,000, off-center strikes worth $5,000 to $50,000 depending on how dramatic the misalignment is, and various die crack and die break errors worth anywhere from a few hundred to a few $1,000s. So even if you find a 1995 quarter with an obvious error but it's not the ultra-rare triple strike off-metal variety, you could still be looking at a coin worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, which is still a fantastic discovery that could pay off credit cards, fund a vacation, or provide a significant financial cushion. The impact of the 1995 quarter error on the broader numismatic market has been profound and far-reaching, inspiring a whole new generation of collectors and treasure hunters who realize that valuable coins aren't just ancient rarities locked away in museums. They're potentially hiding in the change you receive at the grocery store, the quarters sitting in your car's cup holder, or the coin jar on your dresser that you've been meaning to roll up and take to the bank. Coin dealers across the country report a massive increase in people bringing in quarters from the 1990s to be examined, and while most of them turn out to be regular coins worth face value, every once in a while, someone walks in with something extraordinary. In 2023, a teenager in Texas who had been watching YouTube videos about valuable coins checked his grandmother's coin collection and found a 1995 quarter with clear evidence of a double strike error, which he sold at auction for $140,000, money he used to pay for his college education with plenty left over for a car and other expenses. The story of the 1995 quarter dollar worth $86 million is ultimately a story about possibility, about the idea that extraordinary wealth doesn't always come from winning the lottery, making risky investments, or inheriting a fortune. Sometimes it comes from simply paying attention, from being curious enough to examine your pocket change closely, and from having the knowledge to recognize something valuable when you see it. Every quarter you handle could potentially be that 1 in a million error that transforms your financial future, and while the odds of finding an $86 million coin are admittedly very small, they're not zero, and that possibility, that tantalizing chance of discovering something truly extraordinary, is what drives collectors to keep searching, to keep examining every coin that passes through their hands, to never give up hope that the next quarter they pick up might be the one that changes everything. So tonight, when you get home, I want you to do something. Gather up all your quarters from 1995, examine them carefully under good light, look for that golden color, check for multiple strike impressions, feel the weight and size of each coin. And who knows, you might just discover that you've been carrying around a fortune in your pocket all along, a piece of minting history worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. A coin that represents not just monetary value but the incredible story of how an ordinary piece of pocket change became one of the most valuable and sought-after coins in the entire world.